As we look ahead to 2025, the convergence of rapid technological advancements and evolving regulatory landscapes is poised to reshape how organizations operate and engage with their customers. To delve deeper into these critical issues, we are pleased to have with us Mr. Anup Kumar, Distinguished Engineer, Head of Client Engineering at IBM Asia Pacific.
Yeah, so if I have to pick, like top three, stuff, I will say one is like everybody was trying to speed up, the services response time. So if it is services company, making the product and the services, much faster to the customer. That was one. In terms of the customer, trying to reach out to them, if they have any query or something, respond to them as quickly as possible, right? So I'll say everybody was trying to put up this customer experience thing, and I will say it not been like massively transformative, but this is one area everybody is trying to improve upon. The second thing is, of course, as soon as we talk about customer experience and all the other things which a lot of these industries were looking at was the cost optimization, right? In terms of whatever the product and services they are offering, can we do at a lower cost? The other thing what we also found is, specifically in terms of go-to-market, the speed of go-to-market. So a lot of this company try to improve, like if you are in a very much a settled market, creating a new product or services. So if they were taking earlier 6 months, now they are trying to cut down, right? And they were able to do in 2 to 3 months. So you are seeing new product and innovation coming off from a lot of this transformation initiative. Again, I will say, it's incremental stuff, but the focus on the three things, right? One is, I will say, the customer experience, personalization, right? That is going to be very important, and you will see massive change, and specifically because of new technology like generative AI, the personalization of the customer experience is going to be impacted. The second thing is about, more around, I will say, application modernization. So you will see, a lot of new services and other coming up at a much faster pace. Again, thanks to some of those AI stuff. And the third part where I see a lot of a big change, I will say this will be more transformative in terms of automation of the process, right? So what we are talking about is at this moment in time, most of the, like if you look at last 10 years, we are trying to incrementally, do the automation more and more. And every year you'll see that any organization is trying to improve in terms of efficiency, performance, and automation as well with systems. With generative AI kind of stuff, what we are looking at stuff like, let's say, agentic workflow, right? Where it doesn't has to be I will say simple scripted workflow, but you can have a complex workflow, and dynamically the workflow is able to do the reasoning and some kind of logical reasoning, and based on that do the execution. So I think that is going to do a lot of changes and bring a transformative experience in terms of automation of the business process. Yes, well, I will say two questions, which keeps coming very often, right? And when we are talking about taking something to production, two important questions keeps coming up. One is, while everybody is very excited about, implementing this technology, at the same time, they are concerned as well. They are concerned about the outcomes, right? Like I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm doing a personalization as a bank and trying to send, a personalized message to everyone of my millions of customers. In that case, even if one message, let's say for some reason it's biased or not aligning to their thinking process or cultural biases, the whole reputation of the company can be at stake, right? So while we are saying, a lot of excitement and all, I'm saying specifically a lot of companies very much, trying to safeguard their reputations, and they are concerned about, what generative AI can do in terms of the harm as well, right? So that's one of the biggest concern what we see. Yeah, so I'll step back a bit. Your question is more about how do you collaborate with the regulations, and how do we make sure that we balance the innovation along with the compliance, right? That's what you're asking. Uh, I will say, you know, thankfully, at least in the APEC market, right? While specifically on the generative AI stuff, or in general AI and the technology stuff, I will say we don't have any like a hard regulations at the moment. Most of the stuff is more like a framework at the moment, and at the moment even government are trying to make sure that there's a balance between innovation. They don't want to just put a blanket compliance. So while if you look at banking and all, for normal reporting and all, there have been some regulations, but when it comes to Gen AI and all, there's a framework being laid out, right? And the regulatory guys are trying to make sure that whoever is designing these AIs voluntarily takes some steps. They are not pushing them like like a compliance at this moment. The good example is, for example, over here we have been working with AI Verify Foundation, and IMD has put up a certain like principles about when you're building an AI system, what are the checks and balance you need to put through, right? So I will say for most of the customer in the APAC region, at this point in time, I will say my advice will be, number one, look at some of the regulations which has come up, like European Union or NIST and all, and follow them, right? They don't have to adhere to them. They are not required at this moment, but just learning about it and what is the implication of that, if it is applied over here, I think that is eye-opening, and that will make sure that they start preparing for it. So that's number one. Number two is participating, right? Every government, like right from India to Australia, everyone, there has been some kind of framework being launched. I think proactively partnering with the regulators, trying to understand, they're trying to build up sandbox. Like example over here in Singapore, AI Verify put this moonshot, right? And that was like a collaboration between industry and the regulators, trying to figure out if you're building an applications, what kind of checklist you want to do, and also as part of that even recommending some tools, right? So I think the proactive engagement with the regulators is going to be the crucial. I think if you look at in Asia, as I said, every government is putting up new things, right? So we saw in Australia, right? Australia government put a new clause. Same thing in ASEAN, right? We got a new kind of a framework as well. So I think we are just short of like a, I will say hard compliance, right? But the idea behind putting up this framework and the guidelines, right? And every country, if you look at Indonesia, for example, the same thing, the data sovereignty was there for a long time, but they're also talking about now, in terms of AI principles and the frameworks. So every, government is will they don't have a choice, right? Every government is going to bring some or other kind of I will say framework and guidance, and they will watch how this progress, because the technology is changing very fast. So even they are a bit shy about putting up some regulations, and by the time you put the things has gone 3 steps ahead. So they don't want to be in a catch-up mode, right? They are looking at more of a industry partnership where we can agree on something mutual, so that it's less negative impact to the user and in general to the government and to the policy. Yeah, so I'll be more prescriptive on this, because I would say that we have done it at IBM. And I honestly feel when I do an assessment and I compare to the other organizations as well, I think pretty much I will say we are way ahead, right? And some of the things, right, I think which the other organization can reflect upon, or you can say take inspiration, right? I would say it's a 3-layered approach, right? On the top, what we are talking about is something like an independent AI ethics board, right? And the idea about independent AI ethics board is, someone who can look at, without worried about, the business outcome and all, look at what is the long-term implications of using and building this AI, how this will impact the users, right? And that is very important that there's an independent reviewer. So that's what we are doing at the top by building an AI ethics board in each of the market and the geography. Second, I will say the most important part in the middle layer, this is for the builders, right? Whoever is building it, making sure that AI governance is part of their day-to-day MLOps or DevOps process, right? So it's not about trying to govern something after building it. It is about right from the beginning, like when you're starting an AI project, do we have a checks and balance to make sure that when you're starting it, the goals are aligned to the organization, right? Second, when you build the models and all, making sure the models are tested for some of the basic stuff like bias, hallucinations, performance, those things are checked right in the beginning. And third, very important, it's not about one time, checks and balance. It has to be continuous to, throughout the life cycle of the application. So making sure that we are able to regularly monitor, even if it is in production, that is important. So I will say this whole process of the AI governance, we call upon, we put in IBM, a platform called watsonx.governance, which takes care of all these three aspects. And I think having something like that, would help to make sure that AI governance and the AI risk is not seen as a separated stuff, but it's day to day. It becomes like an obsession and the culture when you're building the app. And the third part, I will say, which is on the ground, and this is for both the builder as well as the consumer, I'll say there's a lot of education and enablement which need to be enforced. Because I was just this morning, I was saying that even if you're walking on the road, you need to follow certain rules. The same thing, when you're using an AI system as well, there are some basic, intricacy and basic, rules you need to follow. Enabling everyone, right from every consumer is going to help. So those three layers, an independent reviewer, making it part of your MLOps life cycle, and enablement and education on the ground to everyone, I think that will help you automatically to build a culture that where everyone, feels part of the process. I will say start with, a mindset of questioning, right? Like, when you're deploying it, by default, what we have seen is specifically when it comes to AI, while it is a very powerful tool, at the same time, we see that, it is also remarkably, I will say, it's not about like trusting, but, it has got this, where it tendency to hallucinate a bit, right? Or tendency to be not consistent, right? So I think, for any team, whether it's operation, the technology, or the business guys, I think when they are thinking about a use case or when they are building, like running the operations, I think they need to start thinking from that mindset that even if it is accurate, I have to still put the guardrails. Okay, so the guardrails are very important. And I will say, more from every aspect. So like if you're talking about operations, right, guardrails in terms of the security, right, how you're going to put the security, people will try, specifically if it is, let's say, public, people will try to jailbreak and all those stuff. So how do you make sure that, it's fully tested and from all aspect of security? That is going to be very important. Second, from an operational perspective, how are you going to monitor, right, from a day-to-day perspective? And it shouldn't be just like you deploy and forget. The monitoring is going to be important, right? So that's on the operation side. From the business side, I will say again, they should look at a balancing of, I will say benefit and the risk, right? So while there's a benefit, there's also a risk associated with it, and trying to counterbalance, right? And this is where, for development team, I call this like this concept of red teaming, very important, where like while you're looking at all the positive aspect of this AI, you also look at what can be the negative consequence of it, and testing it thoroughly is important, right? So I'll say those are some of the advice I will say, to the technology and to the business guys.
Okay. So this is the last question I want to ask you. We're coming to 2025. We're expectations is there's going to be an even greater use of generative AI technology moving ahead, integrating it further into business processes, into IT, and most IT software now are marketed as having AI embedded into the solutions. What's the advice for CIOs in particular, I mean, as far as putting together an AI strategy for the organization? CIO said, I want AI technology to help me create new business models. Operations said, I want to improve efficiency. Finance says, I want to lower the cost. For the CIO, what is the advice moving forward when you have all these different interests and orders coming in, and then they have to execute, they have to make, they have to realize the expectations?
So I think what we learned in last 18 months with all our engagement, one thing we figured out was the guys who are successful were the guys who had a good clarity in terms of the use cases. So and then on the other hand, we had a lot of people who were more interested into what the technology can offer, and they were trying to create opportunity based on what technology can offer, right? I think both were correct, but where we saw success was more who were very clear about what is the business outcome they want to drive. So I think picking up the use cases and connecting that to the ROI is going to be fundamental when we are talking about adoption of the generative AI. That's number one. Number two, I will say the investment on the governance tools and technology, that is going to be equally important. It is something like when you buy a car, right, or you buy any device, you don't just think about what is the initial cost, but you also look at what is the maintenance cost for the same. The same way, I will say that when you're looking at an AI strategy, don't look at just the use case and what is the cost to deliver that, but you also look at what is the investment I need to make sure that it is trustable, right? So I think making sure that whatever you build is trustworthy, I think that is going to be the central piece of anybody who is doing strategy on AI deployment.